What's up, YouTube? It is your boy JB, and we are here today with the review for Power Book 2, Ghost, Season 2, Episode 5. Now, if I'm not mistaken, I believe this was the mid-season finale. I'm not positive, but I believe so. So the episode was titled Coming Home to Roost. And baby, did a lot of people come home, did a lot of roosters come home. What is it saying? A lot of things came home to roost in this episode. But before we get into the review, you guys, if you guys are watching this video or any other on the channel and are not yet subscribed to the channel, then I'm gonna need you guys to do me a solid favor and stop taking me out on this date and having me pay for it at the end of it. Do me a favor by liking the video, turning your notifications on, sharing the video, and with that out of the way, you guys, without further ado, let's discuss Power Book 2, Ghost. I've been wanting to say 3 so badly. All right, you guys, so let's see. We're going to start up where the episode opened. So the episode, we see Monet, right? So she and Davis, they're in the car. They're getting ready to take Zeke down to the police station so that Zeke can turn himself in, right? Davis is telling Zeke, once you get in there, be like wallpaper. Don't say shit to anybody, right? Monet is telling Zeke that, hey, I'm going to do everything that I can to get you out, right? So then they go into the police station, right? And they're like, my client is here to turn himself in. So then we see Jenny, we see Kamal, and we see Kevin come out, right? And Davis is like, why is the DA here? Like, my client is willingly turning himself in, right? So then, Kamal was about to say something to, they were informing him of what is going on. Kevin chimed in and kind of shut Kamal down, right? But ultimately, they told Davis that Zeke is no longer a suspect. So after that, we see Kamal. Kamal is talking to Kevin. He's like, you cut me off. He's like, yeah. So Kevin still has this hard on for Zeke, thinking that Zeke is still somehow behind this murder of Jabari. And Kamal was like, but he gave you his PBA card, right? And then, he's like, I've been reading Jabari's book, right? And with this book, his other books were all fictional, right? I think he got himself involved in something that might have been real life, right? So then we see Monet. So Monet, she went to Mecca, right? And she's telling Mecca that, the cops don't want Zeke anymore and that the situation has been handled without his money. And she tells him, I'm ready to get back to my reality. He said, what reality is that? He's like, your husband's in jail and the clothes you got on, those clothes definitely didn't come from the money in the bar, right? He says, so you're still in the life. So he says, what I want to do for you is I want to set up a trust fund, not just for our son, Zeke, but for your other kids as well, right? All you got to do is sign on the dotted line, right? So she tells him, like, what, right now, this is just a little bit too much for me. He tells her, well, what you think on it, but I'm not leaving New York without you. So then we later see Monet. So Monet was talking to Kane, and I'm gonna go back to this in a little bit, but she's telling him that Tariq, corroborated what he said last week about the situation with Jabari and with Ramirez's gun. So she tells him, I should have got rid of both of y'all asses, but you were the one with the connect, and I need to be able to trust you, Kane. So she says, what I want for you to do is I want you to give me some dirt on Tariq, right? Let me know what is the one thing that will hurt Tariq. So then we later see Kane. So Kane is talking to Mecca about this situation with Monet, right? And he's just trying to figure out, like, with Monet, he's trying to figure out why did Monet go so hard at him, but not go hard at Tariq, right? And in this instance, I'm really trying to figure out what angle is Mecca working, right? Like, I'm kind of confused. He knows who Kane is. He knows who Kane is. He knows it's really interesting because one minute it seems like when he's talking to Kane that he's going against Monet, but when you see him with Monet, he's telling Monet he wants to be with her. He wants to be a family with Monet, and it's just like, what is what? Like, I can't get a good read on him, and I'm really trying to figure it out. So then, you guys, we move over to Drew and Everett, right? So Drew and Everett are in his room, and Everett is so happy that, Kane is not Kane, but Zeke is back at Stansfield, right? And he's talking about his chances at going in the draft. And Drew's like, "So you were thinking about going in the draft?" He said, "Yeah," but he has a reason to stay there, right? So they get ready to kiss, and there's a knock at the door. And who was at the door? None other than Zeke, right? So Zeke comes in and he's like, "Drew, how do you know him?" I was like, "Oh my God. This fool is an idiot. Like, he is dumb." Drew played it off like, "Oh, I was over here because we would play a video game." But when he said, "How do you know him?" He's like, "You remember that night that we all went out, right?" I'm like, "Dude, you know your cousin is gay. Or maybe you don't. I don't know. But the nigga is dumber than two boxes of rocks just jiggling." So then we see Monet, right? So we see Monet, and she went to talk to Lorenzo. So she's telling Lorenzo that, Zeke is free. The cops are not looking at him anymore. He says, "See, I told you. Just have a little bit of faith." And basically, that's what he was saying. She's like, "Oh yeah, I should have done that." So then he got a call from Sachs, and basically, in a nutshell, Sachs wants to talk about the case, right? He's like, "Are you free to talk about the case?" He was like, "Yeah." He's like, "I need to take this." And she looked at him like, "Are you serious?" So she's like, "You know what? Forget it. I'm out." So she leaves, and Sachs and him have the conversation, right? So, do I want to talk about this part yet? No. So we're going to move on, you guys. So, Tariq. We'll move over to Tariq, you guys. So we see Tariq. So Tariq was at Lawrence's dorm room, right? And he woke up and he texts Davis. He's like, "How long until you turn Zeke in?" And Davis told him, we're taking him in now, right? So Tariq woke up, got his clothes on, and told Lauren like, "Hey, I'm about to dip out." And she's like, "Well, I'll come with you." By the time she came out that bathroom, Tariq was gone, right? So then we see Tariq. He went to his room to get a gun, right? And Braden is there, right? And Braden is telling him that some of their customers have been pulled in for questioning about the drugs. And Tariq's like, "Yeah, I got you. We'll talk about it later," right? He says, has Kane or any of the Tejadas been around here? He's like, "No." He says, "Well, if they do come around here asking for me, tell them you ain't saw me. You don't know where I'm at. Nothing. And stay clear of Kane." Well, Tariq, you're a little bit too late for that one. So then we see Lauren, right? So Lauren is asking Tariq, like, when they were in class, she's like, what happened to you this morning, right? He tells her, "I had an appointment that I forgot about. I needed to get an apartment for this, this hearing with my sister." And she says, "Well, let me help you." And then Carrie came into the classroom, right? So Carrie comes in and she writes on the board in big letters, Karma. Karma. So they were like, "Karma?" And they were like, "That's not part of the lesson." And I'm gonna go back and talk about why she brought up karma in just a little bit, because it's all gonna tie together eventually. So she specifically targets Tariq about karma. She's sticking it to Tariq. She's not talking to any of the other students. She's talking to Tariq, right? So then after class, Lauren's like, "Wow, Professor Milgram, she was really coming at you hard." He's like, "Yeah, and I don't know why." So then Tariq spots Monet, and she's like, "Who was that?" He's like, "That's Zeke's aunt. I'm tutoring him." So he went to go speak to Monet, right? So Monet and him go off, right, to go for a ride. So she asked him like, "Why did I have to hear about this Jabari shit from Kane? Like, you supposed to keep it real with me." But I mean, Monet, you asked him a few episodes ago, did he know anything about that situation with Jabari? Much like what Drew said to Diana, he was fucked either way it go. Either he tell her the truth or he lies to her. Either way it go, it's a lose-lose situation, right? So she tells him that basically, in order to get back on her good graces, she needs for him to find out who Kane's connect is, right? And then she leaves a little nigga on the side of the road. She's like, "Yeah, and you gotta find your own way back." I'm like, damn, y'all don't ever offer this little nigga around nowhere, right? So then Braden, he went back to their room, and Kane was in the room looking for Tariq, right? And Braden says, I don't know where Tariq is. He might be in his girl's room. I don't know. Then there's a knock at the door, and Braden goes to the door, and it's Lauren. And she was like, she's coming in the room, and then she sees Kane. She's like, who is this? He says, oh, I'm Lorenzo. She's like, how do you know Tariq? He says, because of my cousin, Z. She says, oh, so Monet, is that your mother? He says, yes. She said, then she's telling him, he was flirting with her. And, she tells them that, she and Tariq are looking for an apartment. He was like, oh, okay. So then we see Tariq, and Tariq met with the lawyer that's over, the estate of Ghost, right? So Tariq is trying to get him to represent him in this case against Big Mama. And, he tells him like, I really can't do that. But because he feels that Tariq is too young to be anybody's legal guardian. But in the end, he says, you know what? I'll represent you, right? So then we end up seeing Tariq. So Tariq met up with Diana, and he's needing Diana to help him get some product, with Monet not being any wise of it, right? So she says, why do you need that? He says, I can't tell you. She says, if you want me to get the product, I'm gonna need to know why. So he tells her, I'm trying to get my sister out of foster care, right? So she says, okay, I'll help you, but you gotta help me as well. She says, I need your help about Kane. She tells him, I think Kane is the one that took Rico's drugs and replaced it with the sugar, right? And he says, okay. So she says, the next time you talk to him, anything you get from him, let me know. So then we see her, she's talking to Kane, right? Kane doesn't want to give Tariq the drugs, right? And she was like, well, how would you feel if I told Monet that I believe that you're the one that replaced those Rico's drugs with the sugar? He was like, man, you won't know nothing. You just like Monet. She says, well, do you want to find out if she'll believe me or not? He says, okay, I'll give it to him, right? So then we see Kane. So Kane is doing this drop off with Braden, and he's once again asking Braden, have you heard from Tariq? And Braden's like, nope. He's like, what does he need all this shit for, right? Braden says, do you think he tells me anything? He says, but I thought you guys were 50-50 partners, right? So meanwhile, Tariq is watching from the shadows. He's using Lauren's car. He's watching them, and Braden leaves, and then Kane comes out and he leaves, right? So when Kane left, Tariq is following in behind Kane, and he follows him to Mecca's place, right? So he takes his phone and he starts taking pictures, and then he got out the car, and Kane was like, I got a package from Mecca. So at that point Tariq was recording. So then Tariq threw his hood on. He started walking up to the door, and he's recording the door, he's recording the camera, and then Nuff comes out, and Nuff basically roughs his ass up, right? So at that point, the other guy that's upstairs with Kane, he was like, do you know him? Because they thought at one point he was part of Mahoney's crew, but Kane was like, I don't know who that little nigga is. I ain't never saw that little nigga before, right? So they eventually let Tariq go, right? And when they let Tariq go, the next thing we see Mecca, and he's talking to the chef, Nuff, and Kane, right? So they're saying that they don't think he's a part of Mahoney's crew, right? But Nuff and the chef both say the little nigga did show up right after Kane came here. So is this one of your friends? He was like, I said it before and I'll say it again. I don't know who the little nigga is, right? And Mecca was like, okay. So Nuff was like, you gonna believe this shit? And Mecca was like, you put your hands on the kid. Like, we don't need a case. And you didn't even know if he was a part of Mecca's crew. I mean, not Mecca, but Mahoney's crew. And then out of nowhere, Mecca gave the chef a look. He was like, and the man just said, slice. And he fell into the ice where the food was. I'm like, I hope y'all finna get rid of that food as well, because that is just nasty. And I mean, the fact that y'all just let the nigga sit there in the shit was blowing my spirits. Whew. Blew my spirit. All right, you guys. So what I'm about to do is I'm about to go back up, because I'm gonna talk about Monet, right? So They took Tariq. When they let Tariq go, his phone was still there, right? So at one point, Kane took the phone. Later in the episode, we saw as Monet was trying to call Tariq's phone, and Kane came in there and he was like, "Here, is it what you're looking for?" And so he threw it to her, and he was like, he has his case with his sister, and he was like, Kane is in his feelings about the fact that Monet sent Tariq after him. Like, he's like, this is all you now at this point. Like, I have my issues with Tariq, but really and truly, it's all because of you. I'm glad you know that now. I'm so glad that you know that at this point, right? So, what we're going to do is, I'm going to keep it going, you guys. So, Tariq. You guys remember I told you Tariq and Tariq was going to go look for an apartment, right? So he met up with Lauren, right? And the woman looked at him, and he had a beat up eye. His eyes beat up, and Lauren's like, "What happened to your eye?" He was like, "I got robbed, right?" So Lauren is like, he's like, "I need this apartment." She's like, "Well, you were late, and she was already apprehensive about it. Then when you showed up with your face looking like this, she didn't want to do business with you, right?" So then Lauren takes him over to her brother's crib, right? And she went to her brother's crib, so she's gonna let him use her brother's crib. She gave him a lease and everything, so the way that this can help him, right? So then she tells him, why don't you stay here? You can, you can get away from Brayden. He's like, man, Brayden ain't that bad. And so then she starts talking about Jabari's novel, right? Thinking that it's about Brayden. And Tariq was like, but Brayden didn't even know Professor Reynolds. And on top of that, Professor Reynolds only writes about black people, right? Meanwhile, Kevin and Kamal are listening, and now what they want to do is they want to go and go to Tariq's dorm and get a search warrant, go through his dorm and see what information they can find in the dorm. So we see Tariq. So Tariq was supposed to go to the courthouse. He's supposed to be there at 3 p.m., right? So he's on his way there, and out his peripheral, who's there? Monet's there, right? So Monet is there because she is just pissed off at this point, right? So she's like, the shit. So what was our deal? Zeke was never to get involved in any of this shit. What has happened? Zeke got involved. So because of that, you about to lose your sister, right? He was like, Monet, like, I got an address. I got the name Mecca, and I got an address for him. She's like, you got a name and an address. Little nigga, what the hell is that supposed to do for me? But then he says, but you need me. And I mean, he one line when he says she needs him. Tariq gave her all the tea. Drew is still fucking the nigga that, ratted him, told the cops about him, told the cops and the professors about him, Drew, and all that shit with the GTG. Diana is the one that stole the money from the bar. Kane is the one that replaced the drugs with the sugar. I was like, well, god damn, Tariq. But he saved his ass and he went up to the courthouse. He was late, he gave his case, and the judge awarded him temporary custody, right? Meanwhile, while this is happening, the cops, they're going through Tariq's room. We're going to pause here, and we're going to move forward and wrap up the episode, you guys. All right, you guys. So let's go ahead and move forward. Just trying to make sure. Okay. All right, you guys. So let's talk about Carrie. Carrie is a bitch. That's all I gotta say about that hoe. She's a bitch. Don't like him. So Carrie, she got a call from Monet, right? And she tells her, I'm working on it. Monet says, bitch, that ain't why I called you. She says, the cops ain't looking at Zeke no more, so whatever the fuck you been doing, you stop that shit now, right? I don't want to hear your name. I don't want to see you. You don't fuck with my nephew. Leave Zeke the fuck alone, right? Because if you do, we got a problem, right? So then we see Kamal come, and he goes to Carrie, and he's asking Carrie for help. Carrie says, absolutely not, right? But what they want for Carrie to do is read Jabari's manuscript. So then we see, as she's talking to them, right? And then you guys remember earlier in the review, I told you guys that she went to the classroom and she was writing karma on the board. Well, the reason that she wrote karma on the board is because she tells them that the book is about Tariq. Meanwhile, Kevin still has this hard on for, he still has this hard on for Zeke, thinking that Zeke is the one. He's like, Tariq has no motive, and Tariq was the one that was fucking the professor. And Carrie tells him, well, Jabari thought that I was the one, I was having sex with Tariq, right? So then Kevin says, the kids at the school said that the dealer is a white kid. She says, well, maybe it's Braden. And they're like, a Weston. She was like, yeah. So Kevin, like I said, once again, he has a hard on for Z. So they say that at this point, we need to get something on the wire that Lauren is wearing. Speaking of Lauren, Lauren went to talk to Milgram, right? And Lauren is telling her, like, at this point, I cannot wear the wire anymore. So then she tells her, well, I need you to keep wearing it, Lauren. She says the cops think that Braden is the dealer. And she's like, well, what about Tariq? And Milgram was like, but the cops don't think that Tariq is involved, lying through her fucking teeth. So Lauren, she's like, well, I need to warn Tariq. And Milgram says, no, you can't do that. So she's telling her do what, get as much information on Braden as you can, right? So then we see as Kevin and Kamal are listening to The Wire, and they tell her they were listening to it, and it was when she was went to the room, and Kane was in the room, right? And they were like, who is Lorenzo? And they were like, he's Zeke's cousin. And so they did a search on him. So Lorenzo Tejada Jr., right? So Kevin now believes that Kane is an accomplice to the murder of Jabari under the guise of Zeke. And I'm still thinking to myself, Kevin, you saw how dumb this kid is. You think he's that smart to pull up this elaborate scheme of taking out Ramirez and Jabari? Okay, whatever, right? So then they tell Lauren, with The Wire, you're going to have to be a little bit more aggressive, right? And what we're going to do is we're going to put a live wire in there so that way we can hear you and we'll coach you on things to say, right? So then Kevin, like I said, that's when he pulled him to the side talking about Kane, thinking that Kane is the one behind this. I'm like, he's not. Like, you're an idiot. So then we see Kevin, he's talking to Jenny, right? And still got this hard on for Zeke. And she's like, this is not enough evidence for me to do anything. And I already had to do a press conference to apologize for what happened. So if you want me to pursue this, I need something hardcore and factual to go on, not just a hunch. Because basically, all that is that he has is a hunch. So then we see Davis. So Davis was meeting with his brother, right? And he's telling him that Sachs is working on a case that is similar to his, talking about the case with Lorenzo, right? And he's telling him that if Sachs is able to get Lorenzo off, then he's going to pivot him to his case. But somehow, I think Davis is not as squeaky clean as Davis would like to portray himself as. I think Davis got some dirt on him because his brother is trying to protect him in this situation, right? So now let's go back. So you remember, I told you guys that earlier that the cops wanted to get something on Tariq, right? They want to go into his room and, look around and see what they can find, right? So we saw them, they were in his room. At first, they didn't find anything, but then they went toward their drawer and they pulled out Ramirez's badge. So after Tariq was awarded custody of Yaz, he went back on campus. The cops are all over campus. You see Braden. Braden gives Tariq a look, right? And then that's when Kamal them came up behind Tariq to arrest him for the murders of both Reynolds and Ramirez. So then we see Tariq. He goes to he's in the cell, and then a guard comes and tells him his lawyer's there, right? So it's the one that's over Ghost's estate, and that he gives him a letter. He says, your father gave this to me in the event that you were in jail for a homicide. The letter was fucked up. The letter was like, look, I knew you would be here where you belong, little nigga. I was like, damn. Oh shit. So then we're gonna move back over to Monet real quick, right, you guys? So toward the end of the episode, we saw Monet. So Monet was talking to Mecca, right? She's telling Mecca, I think it's time for you to meet Zeke, and I think it's the time to, just tell my kids the situation, right? Baby, when Monet got her ass home and she walked in that house and the kids were gleeful and everything, and she looked like she saw a ghost, because who was in the dining room? It was Lorenzo, and Drew was like, "Is this why you been the way you have been acting lately? Because you was trying to keep it a surprise." She was like, "Oh yeah, I was keeping it a surprise. Nah, you weren't keeping it a surprise. You are surprised. Man, that was a good way to end, the first half of the season. Wow. Good episode. Let me know what you guys thought about it. Leave your comments in the comments section below. Subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell button so you guys are notified when I drop anything else. Share the video, you guys, and into the next one. Stay safe out there. Take care of yourselves. Remember, wash your hands, wear a mask, socially distance, be blessed, and I will catch you guys in the next one.